Last week I soloed the Y6S Season 2 Climax Mission on Master difficulty, and in this video I will share with you the build I used. Master difficulty is very different from Legendary missions. In Legendary you are fighting the ultimate bullet sponges, robot dogs, tanks, chungers, but in Master difficulty, other than the final boss which can be cheesed, there are none of these. What we got in Master difficulty is enemies. Lots of enemies. There are two things my build needed to deal with the waves of enemies. Firstly, a way to distract them so that I wasn't overrun. For this I went with an assault turret and a striker drone. In order to make them more effective as distractions, I ran two skill tiers on the build, which buffs their health and damage output. For the sections where you need to hack terminals, I did swap out the drone for a Stinger Hive. Crowd control is very effective at keeping enemies off your back as well. Secondly, strong survivability in the form of 3.3 million effective armor, 5% armor regeneration, and 48% protection from elites. I am getting this from 3 pieces of the Gilligard brand set, including the named mask Chill Out, all of which are rolled to armor cores. This mask is good in this build because it comes with 2 mod slots, which lets me run 2 12% protection from elite mods and get to the 48% I'm running through 4 of them. I am running the talent Unbreakable on my Gilligard chest piece for the 95% armor replenishment every 60 seconds, which gets me to that 3.3 million effective armor. I'm guessing you're watching this video because you want to get the exotic chest, Provocator, which comes with 25% damage resistance to enemies within 25 meters. I'm sorry to say, but it's not a good chest for PvE. Ignoring that it is useless against any enemies outside 20 meters, compare it to Unbreakable. With this build for Unbreakable to proc, I will have taken 1.7 million of damage. At this point, I will have 300,000 of armor left with the Provocator, which will be completely gone while I still have 1.2 million armor left with Unbreakable. Yes, I know that Unbreakable only procs every 60 seconds, but if you need it more often than that, then you have a bigger problem and the Provocator won't save you anyway. On top of that, using the Provocator blocks me from using other exotics, like the Memento backpack which I used in this build. The Memento is a god tier solo exotic, which adds a 5-minute buff for 3% armor regen, 30% weapon damage, and 30% skill efficiency. On top of that, every time I pick up a trophy, which is a lot given how many enemies there are, I get a further 10% weapon damage, 10% skill efficiency, and 50% bonus armor for 10 seconds. Skill efficiency is awesome for this build because it buffs the health and damage of my turret and drone, making them more effective distractions, and reduces their cooldown so I can get them back quicker when they are destroyed. 30% weapon damage is also great because I'm running 5 armor cores and only 2 weapon damage cores. Weapon damage is additive within the Division 2's damage calculation, but scales well when you're running low base weapon damage on a build. If you aren't familiar with how damage works in the game, then I get that this is just gobbledygook. Watch this video for a straightforward explanation of how it works once you are done watching this video. The weapon damage also buffs the damage done by Pestilence 6, which is the weapon I used. The Pestilence receives some great buffs in Title Update 22 to its base damage, rate of fire, and reload speed. Add on to that its talent, Plague of the Outcasts, which applies a debuff dealing up to 50 times weapon damage to enemies that spreads on death, and it is a top tier weapon. Because survivability is such a focus of this build, the Pestilence ticks are well below the max you can get from them in other builds. I have buffed them a little though through the Contractor's Gloves, which adds 10% LMG damage and 8% damage to armor, both of which apply to the debuff. At max stacks, the Pestilence ticks will still hit for around 6 million damage over 10 seconds, which makes taking down elite enemies much easier. There are alternatives to the Pestilence that you could use. Rather than relying on the assault turret and striker drone to distract enemies, you can use stasis effects to crowd control them. If you go that route, then blue screen is a great option with its 5-second pulse, disrupt and disorient, and nice 200 round mag size. The Iron Lung applies the burn stasis effect to enemies after firing half of its base mag, and St. Elmo's applies the shock stasis effect after about a mag and a half. And then there is the Scorpio shotgun, which applies the poison, disorient and shock stasis effects to enemies, which is the ultimate crowd control at close range. One way to buff the damage of the Pestilence ticks would be to run brand sets like Walker Harris for its weapon damage and damage to armor, but one of the biggest challenges you encounter with Master difficulty is being overrun by enemies. To counter that, it is better for Pestilence to hit a little harder immediately, rather than relying on the ticks to take down enemies over 10 seconds. So I use one piece of Seska for its critical hit chance, and stack critical hit chance and critical hit damage on every piece of gear. Well, except for this one where I didn't have the perfect roll. For specialisation, I use Technician for the skill tier that buff my assault turret and striker drone. However, Survivalist is a very good alternative for two reasons. Firstly, it comes with 10% protection to elites, which would get the build to nearly 60% damage reduction. And secondly, there is a cheese for the final boss that lets you skip its mechanics. If you shoot the boss with a survivalist crossbow before entering the final room, it cracks its armour, jumping straight to the DPS phase. So this is the full build that I used. Of course, the build is only part of what you need to complete the mission. There are also the strategies that make it easier, which I'll be covering in a video shortly, so look out for that.